The Mooch at the Boo is the 9th episode of the 6th season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by Jeff Melman, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It's a decent episode, there are definitely some good moments, but there are also bits that I don't think were that great, and I will mention those as we go through the episode. Starts off in the house, Evelyn phones. It turns out she's been in Dubai, and Alan has meant to be going over there to water her plants, check on her house. He hasn't been doing that. He doesn't tell her that. And he will go over and do a last-minute plant switch before she gets back home. And Charlie also asks Alan to get his car because it's going in for a service at the dealership. And that's basically establishing most of the main narratives. The last part of the narrative is established when Charlie sees Jake out on the deck leaning over, and he kind of scares Jake and he falls down onto the sand, which was a pretty funny moment. And it turns out Jake is spying on the neighbour because there's an attractive girl there. So Charlie says, let's go and introduce you. So they go over to the house, and we have the daughter Celeste, played by Tinashe. I apologise if I've mispronounced that. And her father, Jerome, who is played by Clarke Duncan. And Jerome is an NFL player, and Charlie's really interested in him as a neighbour, and Jake is very much interested in Celeste, and off they go to walk on the beach, and we'll come back to that in a moment. We are then down at the dealership. Alan is there. He talks to a woman called Diane. She seems really nice. She's played by Bellamy Young. Alan ends up talking about clipping his toenails because Alan is Alan, and he ends up taking her out for something to eat. Technically, that's what the plan was. And we'll come back to what actually happens in a moment. And there's some really great moments with Alan. We then have a part of the episode that I thought was just way overplayed to the point where I actually timed it. Jerome comes over. He's a big guy, and Charlie's actually quite intimidated by him. And he asks, "Where's my daughter?" And, of course, she's out with Jake. It's been quite a long time. So Charlie, a little intimidated, says, I'll phone Jake. And he rings Jake's phone. And first of all, this is unbelievable because this is a teenager away from his phone. I don't buy it as a teenager who also was attached to her phone. And the phone rings. And it's a really awkward, offensive ringtone. Which, yeah, it was quite funny. But it went on for 70 seconds. And as I said, I timed it after I watched it. I thought, this is getting ridiculous. So I rewound it and timed it. And it was 70 seconds of just the ringtone and Charlie looking a bit frantic and Jerome looking really annoyed. And yeah, it was funny to begin with, but that's more than a minute of the entire show. And it was just way overdone. I don't know if they hadn't planned for it to go that long, but they had to cut something elsewhere. So they managed to keep the full thing. I don't know, but it was just longer than it needed to be. We're then with Alan and Diane, and he actually took Diane back to Evelyn's, and one of Evelyn's dresses is on the bed, and Alan panics and he ends up saying that he wears it, and Diane said she could be into that. So Alan goes off to another room, and a couple of minutes later, or however long it is, I didn't time that bit, when he comes back out, he's wearing this red dress, and I have to say, it looks great. The dress itself is very, very striking, very eye-catching, and very bright red colour. However, what Alan doesn't realise is that before he comes out of the room, Diane is scooping up Alan's clothing and has driven off with Charlie's car, and Alan runs after her, of course, in the dress. He tries to phone the police and they put him on hold. And I have to say, Jon Cryer moved very swiftly in a dress that I would be terrified to run in. Not necessarily because it's restrictive, but it's very flowy and I would trip. I absolutely would. So Jon Cryer moved very smoothly in that dress. And while he's on the phone, all we hear are the words, "Why am I not surprised?" Evelyn is standing in the doorway with her suitcase. And what I love about this, I don't know if this was a conscious decision, I'm assuming it was, but Evelyn is dressed all in black. Which means that even though she's come into the room, our eyes are still on that bright red dress. And I don't know, as I said, maybe it wasn't intentional, but I feel like probably would have said, let's not put Evelyn, unusually, let's not put Evelyn in something bright and eye-catching, because usually she does wear very bright, very bold colours, but not today. The eyes are all on Alan in the bright red dress, and I loved it. It was a great moment. We're then back at the house. Jerome is emotional. He's a single father, and Jerome and Charlie then catch Celeste and Jake kissing, and then we're back at the house and Alan comes in the dress and Charlie realises his car's not there, and yeah, that's basically it. That's the ending. It just really fizzles out. It's a really unsatisfying ending. I did not like it. I was left wanting more. I felt like it was unfinished. I needed something else. And unfortunately, that meant that I came away from it feeling not as satisfied as I would have liked. But there are some really strong moments. The good bits are brilliant. The rest of it, not so much. The ringtone, way longer than it needed to be. We absolutely could have kept that much shorter and actually had a more satisfying ending, used that time to make the ending a little bit funnier. Yes, Alan coming in the dress, it worked very well. There's that shock factor of, look, he's still in the dress, obviously, because his clothing was stolen as well, so what else is he going to wear? Although, I feel like Evelyn could have at least offered him anything else to wear, but this was funnier. But everything else just fell a bit flat. I don't really like what they did with the story with Celeste and Jake. Well, it's not so much that I didn't like what happened. It's that, again, it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't funny. I just didn't really care for what they did with that. I kind of like what they did with Jerome. I think his character had a lot of layers. I think he was quite interesting. But I didn't really get any comedy out of Jake and Celeste. And yes, the focus was definitely on Jerome. But again, that part of the episode just wasn't that appealing. So for me, that's another missed opportunity where we could have had a bit more comedy. All of that being said, though, I don't mind it and I wouldn't skip it. If I'm binge watching season 6 of 2.5 Men, I wouldn't be skipping The Mooch at the Boo. And I'm actually hoping that there are some bloopers from this episode. I have the box set, and most of the seasons have bloopers. Not all of them, but there are bloopers for season 6, which I will watch once I've finished rewatching this season. I think some bloopers in the red dress could be quite fun, but I'll find out when they get there. Looking forward to it. And in general, The Mooch at the Boo, while definitely has room for improvement, it's still not a bad episode of 2.5 Men.